Welcome back. Thank you to everyone joining us in person today and then now virtually. Thanks to those of you who have joined the live stream portion. This event is really dedicated to timely conversations around the future of tech policy. And so I'm really pleased to kick off this part of the day by introducing our keynote speaker, Deirdre Mulligan. Deirdre, as many of you know, is a professor in the School of Information at UC Berkeley and a faculty director of the Berkeley Center for Law and Technology. Her research explores legal and technical means of protecting values such as privacy, freedom of expression, and fairness in socio-technical systems. And she just most recently served as the Principal Deputy U.S. Chief Technology Officer in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. She's also been the director of the National Artificial Intelligence Initiative Office in the Biden-Harris administration. So much to tell us about where she envisions the future of tech policy over the next 5 to 10 years. So Deirdre, thanks for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with this community at such a consequential time for the relationship between democracy and technology. I'm really sorry I can't be with you in person. The pleasure is being in a community of technologists, computer and data scientists, social scientists, designers, and lawyers who consider the development, design, and deployment and regulation of technical systems essential to protecting democratic values and human rights, building an economy in which all members of the public thrive, and tackling the challenges we face from the rise of authoritarianism to climate change. 30 years ago, I helped start the Center for Democracy and Technology, becoming an early member of what has more recently become known as the public interest technology field, and cementing my affinity for this interdisciplinary group of thinkers and doers seeking to use law and technical design to build a more democratic future. The honor is being asked to share some thoughts with this esteemed group about where we've been, the challenges we face, and the faith I have that we can continue to make progress in aligning technology with human rights and democratic values despite them. We are at a truly pivotal moment. Everyone around the globe recognizes the stakes of technology, the design and use. 30 years ago, when I began at CDT, it was possible and relatively common to talk about cyberspace and meat space. One could unplug and leave the internet behind. Your device was less likely to feel like an appendage on your body. But today, technology pervades all aspects of our social, economic, and political life. Human rights, economic opportunities, functioning democracies are all deeply entangled and dependent on the technological infrastructures and artifacts we build. Whatever policy goal you seek to advance or whatever rights you seek to protect, you must care about the technical standards, the product designs and defaults, the market decisions about their deployment, because all of these shape our interactions with each other and with power for commercial and government actors. Democracies understand the importance of not only regulating, but of also proactively shaping, building, and using technology to support human rights, democratic values, and democratic institutions. During my time serving in the Biden-Harris administration, I had the privilege of watching and participating in a government that wanted to center people's rights and safeties in the design and use of technology by governments, by the private sector, and across the globe. It was a true honor, and it was also a really important proof point. We showed that one could do it, that we could develop policies that guided government use of technology, that brought the public in participatory ways into decisions about its design and use, that we could bend technology in the direction that would support human flourishing and democracies and democratic institutions. Of course, authoritarians around the globe understand the power of technology too. This broader public recognition that technologies have politics, they arrange power and authority between and among humans and organizations, and structure the activities and conditions under which they occur. That code, while not law, does shape our lives in ways that matter for public policy and for the public good. This recognition has fueled the steady growth of the community assembled here today. Civil society organizations, recognizing that all policy involves tech policy, have invested in folks that understand the social and political as well as economic importance of technical designs and deployments and can actively participate in shaping them. Foundations have stepped in to support these efforts in multiple ways. The leadership of organizations like New America, including the Open Technology Initiative, have played a key role in shaping civil societies and government's view on technology's role in democracies and the role of technology policy standard setting. OTI has modeled the importance of community-led and governed technology projects. It's demonstrated the importance of technical expertise in policy design as well as implementation, and it's incubated important efforts in the tech policy ecosystem, including ranking digital rights that set the standard for corporate accountability indices that assess how the policies and practices of tech and telecommunication companies affect human rights. And through its founding of the Public Interest Technology University Network, New America helped bring academia more fully to the table. The Public Interest Technology University Network has helped build the research base, the connections to community, and the connections to practice, the professional competencies and knowledge the next set of technologists and data scientists and social scientists and lawyers need to enter the world and shape technologies in ways that support democracy. And generally to support technology design and use that supports the public good and social justice. Over OTI's lifetime, the field of public interest technology and its impact has grown. This community has cemented the importance of multi-stakeholder governance, its advanced design and assessment practices to bring the public's voice into important technical choices. It's raised the expectations the public should be able to interrogate and contest the values built into technologies deployed in the public and private sector and the policies that they implement. It's advanced policies that promote equitable access to technologies and that protect the public's rights and safety when technologies are used. Governments, too, have recognized the important role human and values-centered tech policy expertise plays in service delivery as well as regulation and enforcement. During the past 15 years, just in the US, we saw market growth in the number of technical experts helping to shape and set policy and use human and value-centered design to serve the American public. Those tech policy experts are heroes. They delivered big for the public, developing products like Direct File to help the public file their taxes online simply and for free. They protected consumers and workers from biased and invasive technologies in the marketplace and the workplace. And they helped guide the government's development, use, and assessment of artificial intelligence. I am so grateful for their service. But as you all know, we live in challenging times. After decades of progress, admittedly, often painstakingly too slow for those of you who've been in this field as long as I have, to shape technology to better support the public's rights and democratic values, we are in a period of catastrophic democratic backsliding. Executive orders and other actions, canceling and freezing tens of billions of dollars in funding for research and international assistance that undergirds our ability to use technology to tackle big public missions and to use it wisely to protect people's rights. Firing and laying off thousands of scientists and technologists who really are the backbone of policy in action, the weaponizing of personal data entrusted to the government and of technology against the public rather than in service of them, undermining of trust in science and data, retreat from key international venues of scientific and technology policy, including the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, the World Health Organization, and more new and novel activities around cooperative international engagement on AI governance and other tech policy priorities, targeting the private sector efforts to build more responsible and inclusive tech, labeling them woke and dangerous rather than an effort to make sure that technologies, when they're deployed, particularly in the public sector, but also in the private sector, work for everyone. All of this will have long-term consequences for the rights, health, and well-being of the public, and it certainly is undermining U.S. progress in leadership on tech policy. But despite the barrage of federal actions, I remain optimistic about the potential of this community to shape technology and technology policy in ways that strengthen human rights and our democracy. To do so, our community must continue to be bold and creative, and really importantly, clear about the value of our work. There are many bold people in this broad tech policy community, from litigators to whistleblowers to organizers who are fighting to stop the dismantling of important policies that protect the public and to reduce the extent to which data and technology are used to fuel attacks on the public. We must continue to support them financially, intellectually, and emotionally. Their boldness often comes at great personal cost. And as a community, we need to support them and those who are helping them protect the public interest. As somebody who is relatively recently in public service, I can tell you the tireless work that our technologists, our data scientists, our tech policy experts within agencies do is mind-blowing. And the way in which they are stepping up internally, continuing to try to protect the public, but also speaking out at great personal risk is inspiring, and we owe them our respect and our support. This community is also creative. Many of you are advancing sound tech policy and sound technology use in alternate venues. If the federal government is not going to be a place where we can make advances, states and cities that shape the impact of technologies on people's lives continue to be places where we can collaborate and work. Working with policymakers and the government technology and data professionals, we can advance sound tech policy and we can help governments model how to design and deploy technologies in ways that support the public, that do bold and big things for them and protect their rights. Some of us are working with the private sector and in international policy setting venues and in technical standard setting bodies. Some of us have always spent time there. Some of us are broadening our work, deepening our networks, and thinking creatively about where we can continue to advance our causes. And of course, folks are organizing. These alternative paths to social change are critically important at this moment. And I hope that all of you are finding ways that you can both play defense, but also engage in offense. Finally, we must document the value of our work to the public. The well-being of our communities and our world depends upon the socio-technical environments we build. This is recognized. Advances in technology have challenged us before. New leaps in capabilities bring new opportunities, and they also bring new risks. Deciding how to design, use, and refuse technology is a key way that we protect and manifest our values. This is the work this community does. We need to show how it protects consumers, how it supports civil rights, and how it allows the government to serve and protect the public. We must do a better job telling our stories. There will be a moment where we get to rebuild, where we go back in and we rebuild federal agencies, where we rebuild practices in the private sector to advance equity and ideally justice. And explaining how the work that we've done, whether we're inside government or in civil society, is incredibly important to making sure that when that moment arrives, people understand why we need to be at the table and why we need to be a key component of staffing up agencies of the future. So together we can continue to advance a world in which technology respects and protects people's rights and freedoms, advances equity, and adheres to our fundamental obligations to ensure fair and impartial justice and secure opportunities for all. I want to thank you to Lillian Coral and Anne-Marie Slaughter for their leadership and vision and for inviting me to speak with you today. I look forward to continuing our work together on behalf of the public, and I am in awe of all of you in the room for your constant dedication to the public good and your tireless work on behalf of all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Deirdre. I think I can speak for all of us in the room where we say we respect so much the work that you have done before us to lay the groundwork to this day. It is my pleasure to, I think, transition this to also what I feel will be a hopeful conversation about the future of technology as well. And I think nothing better than to have to listen in really on a fireside chat between Anne-Marie Slaughter and Jay Graber, the CEO of Bluesky. So without further ado.
Thank you. So I have been looking forward to this conversation. I will just start by saying that when Bluesky was created, I essentially thought, having been a very active Twitter user from 2011 through about maybe 2017, 2018, and then not, I sort of thought, well, Twitter has moved right and Bluesky is the left alternative. And I know full well, having met you, but also having read, that is definitely not how you envisage Bluesky and how you want people to envisage Bluesky. So instead of introducing you and telling people about how, in my words, sort of what you set out to do with Bluesky, my first question is just to ask you to describe Bluesky as you think about it and you want us to understand it. Now, this is not your average audience. I get that. Many of you know this well, but still, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My path into running Bluesky was actually kind of unconventional. I started out my career working on net neutrality, digital privacy issues. I just learned that Rebecca McKinnon's Ranking Digital Rights project spun out of OTI. I interned at that project when I was in college, actually.
We will now take credit for part of spitting out Bluesky. That's great.
But yeah, my background was in science, technology, and society was my major. I was really interested in this intersection of digital rights and new technology. And so I started off my career working in digital rights policies. But then I realized that the way to really make change at the cutting edge where I wanted to be was to learn how to code and pick up the tools for myself. So I learned how to code. I worked in cryptocurrency as a developer for a few years. Wow. And around 2019, when Jack Dorsey announced that Twitter was building an open protocol, I had accumulated a lot of decentralized protocol experience. I'd been playing with decentralized social protocols for a few years, and I'd been building an alternative to Facebook events at the time and running into the frustrations of not being able to get data. Even if people wanted to use my app, they couldn't invite their Facebook friends because Facebook would close all that down because they're trying to keep you boxed in. And so I had that experience as an external developer of trying to build a decentralized social protocol, trying to build a startup, and not being able to because there's no data portability in that ecosystem. So I got invited into the Bluesky project as a sort of external expert. And it stayed in a research phase for about 2 years. Mid-2021, they chose me to lead the project. And so I never worked for Twitter, but I spun out a separate organization, which I figured could move faster and build the foundation for an open protocol that then Twitter would someday use. So Twitter was essentially our client. We were consulting for them. And the goal was to get them on the app protocol, which we were building, and get them to essentially you'd be using Twitter, but it would be on this open foundation. And the way that Bluesky works now would be how we would transition Twitter to start working. That was the big idea. And then when Twitter was acquired, everything changed, and we were kind of cut loose and set off to our own fate. And so at that time, there were a lot of people looking for alternatives. We put out a tweet thread, and the 12th tweet down in the thread said, and by the way, we're actually building an app on this new protocol that we said we'd build. And then that got retweeted a bunch, and we suddenly had 1 million signups on this wait list. So we said, let's go ahead and build the app. So we built the app on the foundation we originally built for Twitter. This is why Bluesky looks like a Twitter alternative. We essentially just took the work that we were doing for Twitter and ported it onto our own very makeshift app at the time. It was in beta for a long time because we only had about 6 people when we put this out. And we got way more demand than we expected. So today we're at 38.8 million users. We're about 29 people, which is still not that much bigger. And we're building on an open foundation, which is structurally radically different than any other social app out there, except for some of the open source ones. And so we are much more in the category of things like, Mastodon or Nostr or these open protocols. But we've been trying to take open source social mainstream. And that's the biggest difference. It's not anything about aesthetics or politics. It's actually about building an open social experience that replicates the early openness of the web in a social media environment.
Okay, so say a little more about that in the sense of, so I go on to Bluesky and I use it, which I am on, and I use it pretty much the way I would use Twitter, although I'm very aware of the better conversations. I mean, there are no conversations, or at least not when I post. But so open in the sense of you can customize your own community. But as I hear you, I could also, as CEO of New America, adapt it if I had the technical expertise to create a New America social community. Or I'm a birder. I could create everybody whose interests intersect international relations and birding. Is that getting closer to? And then you have sort of an overlapping networked set of communities that all use the same protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. You could create a New America Foundation app that could interact with everything that is in the Bluesky network. It could even port over your followers. So you have the same follower count and same data, but it could be a New America branded app, for example. That's what you can build on an open foundation. There's also a bird feed that is for birders that people have created because there's over 70,000 feeds that are built by independent developers, community builders that essentially replace the timeline on your app. So we say sometimes it's a choose your own adventure app because if you want, you can go in, remove the default feeds, which is following and discover. There's like a algorithmic feed, and you could replace it with the birder feed. And then Bluesky becomes a birder app if you do that. And so that's the extent to which you can radically customize everything in the app. And then outside of the app, there's hundreds of apps building on the protocol now. And so we have Skylight, which is the short form video, like TikTok alternative. We have Flashes, which is a photo-based Instagram alternative.
I was going to say, that's where the real birding apps are.
So you can essentially reimagine every form of social in an open way. And the key aspect for you as a user is if you imagine it, you can build it, and you can move from the social app you're using onto a new one and keep all of your friends and your data, which is the most important piece.
So how would this work if you intersect it with Eli Pariser's New Public? So we heard this morning a lightning talk about where New Public is, really reconnecting communication and community in various ways. Do you sort of see customized New Public apps on Bluesky, or if you're thinking hard, as I often think about, how do we get to community communication beyond next door, which drives me, frankly, kind of crazy?
I think there was actually some conversation about building that on the underlying protocol because then it could interoperate. And I think that's a great idea because the more new kinds of apps you build, the more accumulating network effects that not just our app has, but the entire ecosystem of apps have. And it's essentially like if you use, Google Docs, it's easy to use Google Slides because you just sign in with your Google account.
Yeah.
Now, the reason you can do that is it's all owned by Google. Those are not actually separate companies. They're just separate Google products. But you can replicate that kind of seamless interoperability in an open ecosystem where you can sign into Flashes or Skylight with your Bluesky account. And those are separate companies and separate developers.
But they're all easy to adapt to. All right. So now, I know you've said Bluesky is, social media the way it should be. And it certainly resonates, I think, with many early hopes for social media. But you've also said you're about speech, not reach. So I wanted to ask you to elaborate what you meant by that, because in many ways, you are describing reach, and you're certainly reaching. If you go to 40 million that quickly, it keeps going. So what did you mean by that?
Yeah, our goal was to build a decentralized social protocol for public conversation and to take it mainstream. And so we've made it easy to use, and we've made the ability for you to build anything you want on that ecosystem. And so what this means is essentially you have governance at different layers, and each provider can set their own rules. And so Skylight could choose their own moderation rules relative to Bluesky. We could choose different ones. And then even within the app, we have what we call a system of stackable moderation, where you can stack on different independent moderation service providers to create a customized experience. What we're really trying to address here is the problem with centralized platforms where you can't have a single moderation policy that's one size fits all for billions of users. There's lots of local issues that gets overlooked. There's people who have completely opposing sets of requirements and values for moderation. And the goal of an open ecosystem is you can have the flexibility within the app to do customization, but even outside the app, somebody can come along and say, I don't like the way this works. I'm going to build a new way of doing moderation. And it's completely open for people to do that. And then you can let things evolve as much as society sees fit.
That's such a great image. I'm imagining what kind of content moderation I'd want for my parents' generation, who their grasp of texting and, well, Facebook maybe a little, but the idea that you could actually kind of also create moderation that would help people, right, and enable people of just different generations and use people who are using the platforms in different ways. So reach and speech, but reach through, again, this idea of decentralized, customized communities.
The right to speech is guaranteed the way the right of speech is guaranteed on the web, which is anyone can spin up a website. Like, you can't stop someone from putting up a website. Now there's a question of, can you find someone to host you? And then is Google going to pick it up? And then is the social feed going to push it into your timeline? Those are all separate questions resolved by separate companies and separate service providers. And so you always have the right to speech guaranteed by the protocol, which is anyone can put up their own equivalent of a website on Bluesky, set up their own server, publish their own stuff. Now, are algorithms going to promote that? Well, we run one algorithm, then there's thousands of others. So it might get picked up by some algorithms, not picked up by others. Some apps might host your content, other apps might not. And so you have all these different choices that can create a lot of variety in the broader amplification of that speech.
I wonder if you're going to end up with, well, undoubtedly curated feeds, because this sounds like Substack for the web. I mean, for the social media community. But I can, it's like the long tail with so many different options, but not in the shadow of the behemoths. So, how much is what you're doing shaping the rest of the social media ecosystem? Or can you see that yet? Because certainly the vision is a real threat to the current wildly monopolistic social media environment. But are they noticing you? Are they changing?
Well, we're still early, but we've definitely seen that we've made some moves, and Threads has picked up a lot of our various features and some of the talking points, because it's clear that we're tapping into something users really want. They want choice, they want control, they want to not have their links suppressed. They want to be able to link to their own blog or their own news site or their own news article and have it be seen by their followers. And anyone who's a creator online wants a direct connection with their followers these days. The reason a lot of the advice for online creators, influencers, journalists is ultimately to build your own email list, because that's what you get to hold on to, even if platform policies change on you. And the reason for that is email is an open protocol, and you can have that even if, things change in the world. And so that's what we want to build with social, a level of connection with your follower base that stays even if services, including services like Bluesky, come and go.
That's great. So is that a 5-minute warning for until we get to questions, or is that my total amount of time?
You have 5 minutes until Q&A.
Ah, wonderful. Okay, then you're going to, I thought I'd deprived you all. You and I could talk about countless things, but I do want to talk about governance issues, and particularly in an age of renewed federalism. You decided to go dark in Mississippi. I'd love for you to talk about why. And then more broadly, can you imagine running Bluesky if you've got a patchwork of state laws? I mean, you're running a non-bounded, territorially bounded space subject to territorial laws. And although normally we look at that as laboratories of democracy, it's hard to sort of think of that with digital governance.
Yeah, this is a good example of the challenges smaller providers like us face, because we're a team of 29 people. Our entire company is smaller than the compliance departments at our competitors' companies. And when we get a patchwork of regulations, all with different requirements, some of them conflicting, it would take all of our time, all of us working on it all the time, to try to keep up. And so there's certain places where we have to make the tough choice of prioritizing serving the long-term mission, which is to build this open infrastructure that does social differently, over serving immediate needs of users who want to connect and communicate. And so it's a really hard choice for us, but we had to make that call because we had chosen to comply with the UK Safety Act earlier this year, and that took a lot of our dev team's resources. We built that solution, but then there's another one coming out, and so we're going to have to try to find the simplest solutions that we can to try to keep up. And I think the problem is if regulators are only regulating with the idea of a company like Facebook or X in mind, then they're going to be producing solutions that only those large companies can afford to keep up with.
Yeah, that's like a behind the border barrier with tariffs, right? It's not a direct barrier, but it's every bit as effective. You don't have a big lobbying team. Obviously, you couldn't. But if you did, would you be working through state legislatures, or would you be still trying to work through the Congress? The federal legislature.
We don't really have a policy team or policy position because we're too small to really engage on those. But I would say that the broad direction that we hope policy goes is open competition and open innovation, because we are both competition ourselves by existing as an alternative, but we're also trying to create a structural solution for more competitive, more innovative solutions to emerge. The marketplace of feeds, the marketplace of long tail of smaller providers. We want that kind of a world and that kind of an internet where there's a diversity of different entrants. We think if social media companies have to compete based on user experience versus network effects, that's healthy innovation. And that's what users are really going to see the benefits from. So our goal is to push for things like interoperability or data portability. These are things that we do by default because we basically have fully open APIs as part of the protocol design. We would like to see an internet where open APIs let new developers come in and build new experiences across social for all users.
So you're really fighting the power law, period. I love this because that vision, my last question was going to be, okay, so what does this mean for the internet more broadly? And it's a very different vision of the internet.
Yeah. At South by Southwest, I wore a shirt that said "A world without Caesars." It went viral. And
I heard about this.
We think that really encapsulates what we're building, though, which is the alternative to a world of digital Caesars is a world that you can imagine, because on an open protocol, if you can imagine it, you can build it.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's the perfect note on which to turn to questions, and I'm sure there will be many. We have a question right here.
Hello, Josh Kramer from the aforementioned Eli Parisers New Public.
You'll ask that question better than I did.
No, it was great. But I'm a huge fan of Bluesky, and especially what you're doing with AT Protocol, right? I think it's really exciting and inspiring. And I wanted to ask you, you used as an example for the potential of decentralization email, and in the United States, at least, like 80% of emails on Gmail. So how do you see a future for Bluesky and AT Protocol that's genuinely decentralized and has a lot of diversity in a full ecosystem?
The thing we really focus on is user rights. So do the users have the right to exit? Do developers have the right to build something new? And, I think that power laws in social and any sort of industry do emerge. And ultimately, as long as you can build new entrants and you can have alternatives as users, there's more than one choice, ideally like more than 2 or 3, then you have competition. And so I think that, we've seen other industries, like, for example, when you have a cell phone number, you can switch between AT&T or Verizon, keep your phone number without having to go rebuild your contacts list every time you switch. That means you don't have to be just using a phone company based on network effects. You can use a phone company based on the packages they offer and the services. We think social should be similar in the sense that you can choose based on the services they offer. And then maybe there's a few large companies in that mix, but if you don't like what they're doing, or if they're not serving an underserved niche, you can break out of that. And I think there's actually much more diversity possible in social because people want so many different things. Like a phone service is so basic, but you already have competition there. Why don't we have more of it in social, where people want probably thousands of different social experiences if the ecosystem were open to build on?
Great. Yeah, if I could just take all my email somewhere else, I would. Other questions? Yes, Raja.
Hi, Raza Pinjwani here at OTI. So I've been following Bluesky for a long time, and I've been fascinated with the sort of very deliberate modular approach you've taken to the whole stack. But you have this great idea of, right, we're going to have stackable moderation. We're going to sort of disaggregate and decentralize all of these things. We're going to have people can come up with their own feeds, their own algorithms. I'm curious, what have you been surprised as to which of those have not gotten traction? Where have you gotten traction unexpectedly? And so in which situations have you had to step in and sort of centralize by providing some amount of moderation or some amount of algorithm development where the market, so to speak, has not really, taken the bait?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of solutions based around communities who have specific interests in, I want to moderate, this particular feed better. So we have a popular feed that's actually spun out into a separate app. Black Sky, it started off as a feed, built moderation services, built an app. And so then once you have an active user community around something, you can sustain something like an active moderation service because you can pull in volunteers, and generally it requires probably more than one person to do a big community-driven moderation effort. On the other hand, we've also seen developers single-handedly build some moderation services, and a lot of these that are more successful target use cases that one developer can manage. Like for a while, there was one that was quite popular that was just tagging and labeling all the accounts that came on that didn't have like a profile picture set, had a default username, like things that might indicate an account was really new or maybe a bot. And then users would filter those out using this moderation labeler. And that's something that is a great example of something that one developer can do. So those are unexpected, like traction is areas where it's either an easy lift technically for one person, or it's a community-based effort where you can pull in volunteers. I think areas where we still do a lot of heavy lifting on centralized moderation is, of course, making sure that we maintain a baseline with our community guidelines, making sure that a lot of stuff like spam is constant to keep on top of with every online platform, and it's really hard for any third-party moderation service to do. We do a lot of spam removal, probably the majority of our moderation actually. And, there's some third-party moderation efforts that help sometimes. So we actually have had some independent researchers emerge because the data is all open, who identify like spam and botnets and report them to us. And some of them we've realized have become pretty reliable reporters of like spam network accounts. On the other hand, it doesn't catch all of it. And so it's kind of like a hobby project for some people to do some of this as essentially a public service for the network, because it's open enough that if you want to contribute in that way, you can hop in and do it.
It's digital weeding.
It
I
really
often
is, yeah.
weed when I'm on the phone. It's very satisfying. Sydney.
Hi, my name is Sydney Silvestre, also at OTI. I was gifted that shirt for Christmas, and I thought about wearing it, but it felt like wearing the band concert shirt to the band, so I did not. But my question was, when I signed up for my Bluesky account, I did the first thing I always do, which was go in the privacy settings and try to turn off all the ones I didn't like. What struck me was I did not have to change very many of them. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how privacy, or how you see privacy intersecting with, yeah, it is great. We love it. Privacy intersecting with innovation and openness.
Yeah, we focused a lot on public conversation at the outset because there were decentralized protocols that were focusing on private data. Like there's, Signal for chat and Matrix and things. I guess Signal isn't decentralized, but anyways, they do a good job with privacy. So we really focused in on the problems of large scale town square style conversations and public data. On the other hand, there is some private data, your DMs, stuff like that. We try to not collect very much of it in the first place. That might change over the long term as people build more private facing applications on the protocol. And that's something that we're thinking about how to best support in a distributed manner. But right now, we try to be really good about your data, whatever data we do hold, because we want the focus to be on you being able to just connect, have a good experience, and not have to worry about your data getting used in nefarious ways.
Well, that was perfect. I just got the big pink stop. This was a wonderful conversation. We're thrilled to have you back at New America. We hope you'll come back a lot. And I have to say, I just, may you go from 40 million to 400 million. Sky's the limit. And it's lovely to see you as the face of a major internet company.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining me. Yes, they all exist. Check it out. Proof of life, all right here. As many people have commented. So when we first started planning this event a number of months ago, we wanted to use this. Excuse me, sorry. Somebody was going to remind me that I wasn't actually talking into my microphone. Thank you. So when we started planning this event a number of months ago, we wanted to use the moment not just to look back and celebrate the achievements of OTI, but also to take this particular moment in time and consider both as OTI, certainly, but also as part of the broader public interest tech policy space, to see where we could learn from our victories and also learn from our mistakes. So to have that conversation, I can think of no better group of advocates, strategists, experts, and thought leaders than the past and present leadership of OTI on the stage with me today. So starting from my left, you've thrown my order all off. Thank you, Kevin. Starting from my own way. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's all good. Kevin Bankston, Senior Advisor on AI Governance at the Center for Democracy and Technology. Lillian Corral, Vice President of Technology and Democracy Programs at New America and the head of the Open Technology Institute. Sarah Morris, the Managing Director at Waxman Strategies and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Ellen Davidson, and Head of Government Affairs at Databricks and former Assistant Secretary of Commerce. And Sasha Meinrath, Palmer Chair in Telecommunications at Penn State University and Director of XLab. So, tiny bit of housekeeping, which is that we will be doing Q&A at the end of the panel. So please hold your questions until then. And for those joining virtually, you can ask questions in the Slido chat box to the right of the video, and we will try to get some of those in as well. So finally, before we get the conversation started, I wanted to take a moment to recognize that OTI's work and successes of the last 15 years wouldn't be possible without the many, many other experts and leaders some of whom are in the audience today, and all of whom you can see in that impact document that was on your chair when you walked in. Without them, none of OTI's work or successes is possible. So with that, let us get started. So OTI's 15th anniversary coincides with an inflection point in democracy, I think, as we have all had numerous discussions about. And in the 15 years since OTI was founded, we've been at the helm of both a lot of progress and, frankly, a lot of setbacks, especially of late. So to understand how we arrived here, I wanted to start with Sasha, our OTI's founder, to tell us where did we start, what was the premise, what was the big idea?
Oh gosh, and it's hard to know exactly where to date this, so bear with me here. But really it grows out of work from the turn of the millennia. So I'd fallen in with a group of ne'er-do-wells. I use that term with love and compassion, but a bunch of tinkerers, hackers that were in and around something called indie media, this radical media activist movement that kind of got its start in 1999 and became sort of an accidental technologist through hanging out with people. And people from indie media, they went on and they helped create things like Reddit or WikiLeaks or Twitter or Rise Up. And I was the fool that was like, hey, I'll do policy because that's easy. And in 2004, held an event that brought out a bunch of DC policymakers. So Michael Calabrese came out to that. Harold Feld, for those of you know, he came out to that. And I was introduced to like the Media Access Project. I see Andy's right there. Yes. These kind of old school policy mavens of yore. And really hit it off. I thought like, this is great. And so started working in the policy domain with this crew of folks. And in 2007, they had hunted me to come to Washington, D.C. And I was like, oh, this will be a lot of fun. Like, let's do that. Well, I got here and quickly realized that the technical acumen of D.C., and there were, of course, some bastions, CDT amongst them, was minimal. And where technical acumen resided was in a handful of lawyers, mostly, who were okay, but didn't really build technology per se. Oh, I'm speaking to a whole bunch of lawyers up here, so I'm in danger.
I represented y'all, man.
Yeah. But so
No
I thought
objections, by the way.
Yeah. So thought we should bring technical folks to DC, the actual people that code and build and develop technologies. And to its credit, when I pitched this absurd idea to New America, Steve Cole, the then president, was like, absolutely, son, here's some rope, go hang yourself, and gave me the opportunity to create what was then the Open Technology Initiative in 2008. I'm assuming that's how we got to 15, because it took a couple years to transition.
The math is a little
Wonky, yes. But in essence, started building a group. And so I tapped all these people that had previously been part of building community infrastructure and tinkering and hacking and what have you into the New America offices, which was a couple of different, we'll call it subdomains, all intersecting at once. And so the genesis point was really one of bringing this technical acumen to inform allies and decision makers about technological reality, because the policy reality was rapidly diverging from technical reality. It already started, but it was increasing. And so the thinking, the theory behind how we change DC was, with technical acumen, we will make better decisions and avoid a bleak trajectory that would land us, well, here, right now. So in terms of failures, we've had wonderful successes. I don't want to downplay those. But we also are where we warned very actively throughout the history of OTI we would end up if we didn't fix the problems that all of us have dedicated our lives to addressing. And that's how OTI came about.
Wow. So Alan, I will come to you and ask you, so take it from there, like, how do you see the arc of tech policy from there? Since you've been, your time in this space also overlaps with all the time that Sasha's been talking about.
Well, first of all, let me just start by saying thank you for organizing us and gathering us. Thank you, New America, for hosting us. And honestly, it's super nice to be up here with this group of people. And what I also have to say, like, gosh, what like an spot on kind of afternoon for OTI's 15th. I mean, what 15-year-old doesn't want a series of super nerdy lightning talks? It was great. OTI fits really well in this arc of what we've seen of technology policy development here in the US, here particularly around internet policy, that I think is grounded in this idea, as Sasha said, that, first of all, that technology is making a huge difference in people's lives, a belief that there's an opportunity to really improve people's lives through technology, also an understanding that there are huge risks and disruptions that come with technological change, and a belief that that the pace of change is rapid and challenging, right? And on top of that, I think a sense that we have agency, right? There are important choices to make about what kind of technology we want to build, and what kinds of rules we want to have to govern that technology. And so OTI, I think, came about at a perfect moment when there was this incredible need for an organization dedicated to that idea that we could build things that would improve people's lives, that would improve the policy understanding and posture of our society, and also ultimately over time also really dedicated to thinking about policy and how we could change policy, how we could we had a normative frame also, that openness was an important value to be pressing in the technologies we were building and in the policies we're pushing for. So, I think, we can fast forward now and look back and see these debates are playing out. There's a lot to say about where we've succeeded and where we haven't, and where we have a lot of work to do. But I think, to me, OTI's incredible contribution was really an organization dedicated to this idea of bringing technologists and policy people together, and then also building a field that could do this work, because we certainly need it.
And that is a perfect segue to Sarah, who I will ask, so how did that field evolve, since you've seen it from scrappy nonprofits to all the way to government and back into the private sector?
Yeah, so I'll start by talking about one component of OTI's growth or identity that I don't think we've covered yet, but I also think it's emblematic of how the field evolved. And incidentally, it relates to a different use of the word field, I think a slightly different use that we embodied at OTI during my tenure, which I don't know who has the longer tenure at this point. Mine was about 11 and a half years, but I think that's me now. So we're about tied. So I spanned a lot of the growth at OTI in different capacities, and going back all the way back to my first day in 2011, when Sasha finally relented and hired an attorney to drive some policy work at OTI. My first day, Sasha told me to pack a bag because we would be going to an offsite retreat on the Eastern Shore, I think somewhere, for multiple days. It's a great way to meet your colleagues. But I remember those conversations really vividly because I didn't know that much about how OTI operated or its identity, or at least how it was perceived by the folks on the team. And we spent a lot of time that first day talking about a Venn diagram. And in the Venn diagram was policy, tech, and I don't remember if we called it the field team at the time, but it was the practical applications of all of this, what this means for the real lives of people on the ground. And by the end of the conversation, what we came to realize was that where we did our best work was right at the center of that Venn diagram. When we were combining technical expertise with savvy policy interventions and also doing it in a way that related to people, both, people who were involved in, deploying technologies on the ground, but also the people who were using it. And so that's been, I think, central to OTI's identity. And I think also reflects the sort of the sweet spot or the secret sauce for the broader field of tech policy advocates, where when we can figure out what is the tech that's needed, what are the policy mechanisms that we need to get us there, and how is this improving the lives of real people? That's where we elevate tech policy to dinner table conversations. And that's, I think, where the real specialness of this space has been.
So Kevin, I'll come to you and ask you. So what do you think are the biggest wins we've had? And how do you think we achieved them?
Okay, let me remember how to write a grant report. First, seriously, folks. Yeah, no, but seriously, folks, I do want to say thank you for having me, and it's just really humbling being in this collection of folks. And I'm really proud to be here, and I'm really proud to have you here, and thank you as the 6th director of OTI, since you led OTI during an interim period while it was looking for its next director. And so you also know the joys and pains of leading this ship. But wins. Often I think truths come down to people's names sometimes. And I think a lot of truth is in the name of Open Technology Institute. It says a lot about its values. It says a lot about its theory of change or its approach. And I think of technology broadly. We're not just building technologies, we're building processes. And often I've found that OTI is at its best when it is building something, when it is inventing something. Really in many ways, a foundational part of OTI's history is the Commotion mesh networking project, which was one of the sort of foundational, in decentralized tech for human rights tech plays 15 years ago. And not only were they building a technology, they were helping build a community around those principles, around those funding streams, around those concepts of, that we see coming down through things like Bluesky, of decentralized tech as a key to power. Ranking digital rights. I would say that dollar for dollar, ranking digital rights was probably the most impactful civil society play for impacting internet company behavior in the 2010s, period. If you'd like to argue with me, I'd love to hear your argument. But I saw it happen. Tech Congress. I think I did a lot of important work at OTI as policy director and as director of the organization. I think the most important work I ever did was sitting down to lunch with Travis Moore when he was about to fold up and stop and give up trying to find a fiscal sponsor and adequate support to start Tech Congress. And we, at the time, thank you, Ford, had enough flexible funding for public interest technology needs to put that money next to that person and that idea and start a process, build a pipeline, invent something that would help educate our tech policy processes, hopefully for as long as we have a country. I don't know how long that'll be. And they, it continues. We have Sasha's own X Lab, which in many ways has been sort of like a very agile mammal running around finding strange bedfellows in tech policy where necessary. There's the Measurement Lab, which is still the open and premier broadband measurement platform out there. Who has that track record? And they, I'll say we, but really it's really Alan, Sarah, the first policy director, Ben Lennett, built a world-class, or I guess I'll say capital class policy shop as well, that when you name your CDT or your EFF or your EPIC, your mainline, or dare I say legacy, digital rights groups, OTI's there too, and they're punching above their weight because they have always had fewer, well, not always, but have often had fewer resources than those groups. So what have been our wins? Our wins have been when we do things that no one else is doing and where we are true to our name and we've been a laboratory for experiments. And I think the key thing to learn there is some experiments fail and you need to be willing to tolerate risk in your investments. So let's keep taking risks, guys, because we really need them.
Here, here. So I think the part of the wins, which we're certainly going to be talking about the wins, but I think part of some of the wins that's been key is the ways we've been able to change the narrative. And so, Lillian, I wanted to come to you on this one. Like, what do you think were the successful narrative changes? Like, why do you think they worked in terms of the wins? How was that successful in terms of changing the story?
Well, I'll reframe your question a little bit in terms of, I think, what the opportunity is now. And I think Deirdre actually alluded to it. And I think, I know some of what Sarah will talk about will also speak to this. But Deirdre said something earlier, which I thought was really critical. Paula and I noted it, which is that all tech policy should be part of all policy. And I think one of the things that's really critical that I'm thinking a lot about is how do we ensure that our funders, our partners, our political allies understand that tech policy has to be core and central to the democracy agenda that we set up for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That these things are not separate, they're inextricably linked, and that if we are going to have an ability to have a free expression in this country in the way that it needs to be set up, if we're going to have fundamental rights to privacy that we need to ensure that our tech policy agenda really aligns with that. So when you ask about narrative, I mean, I think when the field has, and these ladies and gentlemen know this better than I do, right, have lived through it, when the field has been able to broach outside of just the tech narrative and really connect to the bread and butter issues of the average American person, I think that's when we can actually have true gains. We heard earlier about the value of privacy. For the average American, the value of privacy, sure, is important, but it's not as critical as putting food on the table, accessing information, being able to just have a safe and secure home. And so I think part of the wins will require us to actually make sure that we, within the tech policy space, really start to broach outside of it and connect our issues to the things that matters to the average person. I come out of the organizing, my early days are in the labor movement and in community organizing. And I just think that has always grounded me to the fact that it doesn't really matter how important our issues are if we can't really connect it to the day-to-day reality of someone who works an 8 to 5 and or has more than one job. And I think that that's the challenge for all of us in the tech policy space to figure out how we broach that narrative in the next, I feel like we have to broach it soon, 3 to 5 years at most. So that's, and I think, the example being, and I know, obviously, I think net neutrality is the one example, right, where we were able to really, as a field, make that connection. And I think back to the notion of OTI, open, right? This idea that the internet should be open and that no one should be messing with the speed of it. That was just really simple for the public to get. I think when we make it very complicated is when we sort of challenge ourselves to be able to really connect to the average person.
To be honest, you've walked right into my next question for you.
Not intentional.
Which is, and you all have said, have already been sort of speaking at the edges of this, what hasn't worked and why? And I'll throw this question out there, Lillian, you can start if you like, since you're already sort of there, but throw this open to all of you.
Go ahead, Go ahead, Kevin.
So
No, please.
Well, I think one thing, I'll start by saying one thing, and adding a thing that I think we've done well, which is we've met the moments when they've come, right? We have been, and this relates to something, and it was absolutely true in net neutrality, which was you can't necessarily create momentum. Like you can't go out in the world and say like, everyone, thou shalt care about net neutrality today. But you can do the really hard work day after day, month after month, year after year, which is what happens to prepare for the moment that momentum takes hold. And we drove some of that momentum. There was the 150 plus company letter that Alan and I and many others worked on. There was the John Oliver sketch, which involved a ton of work behind the scenes. But those weren't the things. So those were the sparks that lit things on fire. But all of the kindling had been gathered already, and the organizing and coalition building had already happened. And I think that so to flip that a little bit, I think we need to be focused more on preparing and taking the steps to advance towards that momentum when it happens, and less about just sort of like trudging through the values and the work the things that we care about, and really thinking strategically, and dare I say politically, and I mean this in the small p version, not necessarily partisan, because I think the work that we've done at OTI over the years transcends partisan divides in almost every instance, and really think strategically about where we want to go, the steps we need to take there to get there, and how we talk about these issues in a way that resonate not just with the folks in this room, but with kitchen tables across the country.
Well, I can just spin off of that because it feeds naturally into what I was going to say, which is sadly, in many ways, our biggest wins were also our biggest losses, to the extent that I'd say our biggest policy wins and the places where we captured political and public attention the most were net neutrality and the open internet order, and the FCC's privacy rule on customer proprietary network information.
Such a kitchen table issue, Kevin.
Well, it was about these telecoms have all this data on you and it should be subject to the same rules, blah, 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 blah. And by the traditional measures that one would measure these things in terms of your influence on a policy debate, which is really, did they cite you? Well, you know what? The CP&I order and the FCC order, Chris can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe OTI, our comments, either we as an organization or our comments were cited more than anyone else in both of those proceedings. Like, that's really impressive. And both of those became dead letters as soon as Trump was elected the first time. And it highlighted that we are in an era of, I would say federal policymaking is broken. We're in a game of what Justice Jackson Brown just called Calvin Ball. And if you're not familiar with Calvin and Hobbes, Calvin Ball is a game where the only rule is that the rules have to change. There is no single rule. And so right now we have a Supreme Court where the past 17 rulings have been in favor of Trump. Mostly against their lower courts, so like not seeing much redress there. Congress, the White House, so we're actually seeing the failures of federal policy and the need for experimental approaches to making change, especially through how we design our technology. Because, again, looking at successes, we didn't build it, but we were a part of the community that did. Signal, the encrypted messaging app that everyone uses if they're smart now. That came out of State Department and other funding to a, wacky hacker dude, brilliant guy, Moxie Marlinspike, dreads, the whole deal, cool hacker guy, funded to help support human rights. And now we all use it and it's a key part of our infrastructure. Not OTI, but EFF, the HTTPS Everywhere project, probably has done more to protect the privacy of everyone on the planet. Like, I don't know. I can think of nothing else other than Signal or Facebook turning on encryption, frankly. So like, these are the kinds of interventions that OTI needs to maintain the flexibility to be able to build. Whether it is a process, whether it is a technology, there are so few places that can do that and fuse those different expertises. And this is one of them. And I'm really proud that I got to run it for a little while. And I bet y'all are too.
So I was just going to add, it's funny because we were sworn to secrecy for a while when we were doing this, but a dozen years ago when OTI worked with then Radio Free Asia, with Libby Liu, and Libby Liu and I sat around and dreamed up something that we called the Open Technology Fund. And we're like, well, we can't call it that because people know it's an OTI thing. We're like, no, they'll never figure it out. and then when we were
Someone just asked me yesterday the difference between OTI and OTF. So
excellent. Right. And then I tapped Dan Meredith, an OTI veteran, to be the first director of OTF. And I was like, they're going to figure it out. I was like, no, they're not going to figure it out. And then we set up the website. We literally took the blue color of OTI and made OTF use that color because we're geeks. We're geeks. Nobody figured it out. And our first grant portfolio from that included, I think it was like $800,000-900,000 to transition Whisper Core into Signal. And I remember Dan and I sitting around on my purple couch figuring out how to get people to understand that a secure texting platform was going to be like the bomb. Long story short, a lot of OTI's work has always been, as an open technology institute, savvy, behind the scenes, and massively impactful in ways that people often are unaware of. The ties between OTI and Whistleblower Aid, or OTI and the Calyx Institute, or OTI and Brave New Software, or all these other things are part of our history, which goes to what I think is the most important deliverable. And I don't say this in sort of this big old kumbaya thing, but the network of people that OTI has spun out is just incredible. And when I think about the fact that under the Biden administration, 2 folks had infiltrated NTA at the highest levels, and OTI alum or fellow Lena Khan was running the FTC, and I was like, man, we're taking over a good portion of the relevant government agencies that do work in my domain. That's really cool. I also am very aware, okay, OTI at 15, we're in our toddlerdom now, maybe the awkward teen years. This network is still growing. And still, I don't think many of us have written the first line of our epitaph yet. And therefore, I expect great things from the alumni of OTI into the future generations, because I know that there are so many problems that must be addressed over this near future time horizon. And I expect that the people, not just on our stage, but there in the audience, will be a part of those solutions.
So if I may, just because I don't want to run out of time, Alan, I kind of wanted to shift slightly to a question that a bunch of these folks have, a bunch of you all have already raised. And I think since you've had the highest, you are amongst this group, you've had the sort of highest elevated position in the government. And so my question to you is how do we...
So far.
Only so far. But how do we make technology into a bread and butter election issue that Americans care about? Because I feel like that's a lot of where we're going. We need to get people, Lillian was saying, we need to make this into an issue that people care about, and we've succeeded, as Sarah was saying, and as Sasha was just saying. So where's the special sauce there, you think?
Well, I'll say it's been a challenge over time, right? We've talked about making these issues we really just need to make encryption bread and butter, a table topic for folks. Well, the funny thing is, as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, actually, there's probably a lot of people who do know about privacy and encryption and making sure their kids are being safe online. So I think as the technology has gotten more important, I think it will become more important to people in their everyday life. And that will make it more of a bread and butter issue. We're creeping closer to those moments. We've seen some of that. I'll just say, from the position I was just in government, you take issues like that OTI has really been engaged on, broadband adoption, right? If you talk to people in this country who do not have good internet service, and I've talked to a lot of them, it is an election issue. It is a tabletop issue. It is a kitchen table issue. And if you talk to people about what they're worried about, things like their kids online, kids' safety today, the kinds of conversation, the talk that Amina gave earlier today, I think there are now a lot of things. It's not necessarily the front page of the paper. It's not necessarily the first debate question that a presidential candidate gets asked, but it's part of the conversation more and more. And I just think we're going to see that more and more as these issues become more important in people's lives.
I'll just build on that. I mean, I think the one opportunity, again, that we still have to tap into is just really connecting to different aspects of movements, right? This year, as DOGE, started its efforts across the federal government, our team, I'm thinking about Sarah and Prem's work, to connect to immigrant rights groups, to ask them, like, what is the information you need? We happen to know what DHS, the kinds of contracts and the kinds of data that DHS has been collecting. How do we feed that to you and connect it to the work that you're all doing on the ground? And what are the questions or the technical assistance that you all need? The more that there's similarities, obviously, and we've heard a little bit about it today in the women's rights movement, the more and more that we continue to do that cross-sector connection and movement building, I think that's the way we make it a bread and butter issue, whatever your bread or your butter is. And then I do think, one of the things that I would say, when I started my career, it was not in tech policy, but the thing that helped me broach into tech policy was actually broadband adoption. I used to work across the state of California, and I would be in the Central Valley in Fresno talking to parents, immigrant, migrant worker parents, about, quote unquote, the importance of the internet, because I was being paid grants by the federal government to try to convince people about the importance of the internet in the early 2010s. The reality is they already knew that, right? I didn't need to convince them. These parents knew that the internet was critical. One thing I would say is, in order for us to succeed, we have to remind ourselves that central issue of connectivity and access is so critical, and we sometimes overlook it. And if we care about bread and butter, if we care about AI, and we don't place importance on things like, do we have a fast, affordable connection just as a starting place? And that privacy starts when you connect online. If we can't make that narrative and that story simple, then I think that's where we start to lose. But the only way we do that is when we actually start to get out of the tech vertical and connected into these other movements. And I think that's why we've seen such a rise around the kid safety issue. The people that are leading that debate are moms who care about their kids, and moms who've had to experience really terrible things that have happened to their children. We've got to continue to figure out how to make those inroads to other communities beyond just our technologists and our policymakers. And I think that's, again, the opportunity for us.
I would name two other opportunities that I think are really important. I know we're getting close to audience question time. That we should be thinking about, and it relates to what Lillian was just talking about. And it's something I said earlier. It's this need for a political sharpness. It's not just enough to have a good idea, to talk to the right policymakers. We need a strategy to really build momentum around these things that we care about. And part of that is widening the tent. Part of it is thinking about engaging. When we were at NTIA, I'm thinking of two examples in the context of the broadband access and adoption work. One was the launch of the Notice of Funding Opportunities for 3 of the grant programs, BEAD, Middle Mile, and Digital Equity. The other was the ongoing mapping efforts with the FCC to get to a point where we could divvy up the money for all the states to figure out how much each state would get. Both of these things were like monumental, Herculean tasks. And it wasn't enough for us to, and I was Alan's broadband advisor at the time, it wasn't enough for us to just like write a good notice of funding opportunity and put it out in the world and say, here guys, like apply. It involved painstaking work behind the scenes to both make sure that the public, that stakeholder groups, and including the public interest groups, but also including housing groups, workforce groups, agriculture groups, industry, all knew what we were, the vision we had and what we were trying to execute, that we kept members of Congress and their staff informed, that we were working closely with governors in both red states and blue states. so that expectations were set by the time the launch happened. And then on the mapping, it was this combination of like technical assistance for these state broadband offices that were just like, I don't understand how these maps work. You need to tell me what to do. And also making sure that there was the sort of like air cover for this all to land well again, when we ultimately made the announcement that next June, to divvy up the money. And I say that to try to put a concrete point on like what the task is in front of us. It's not just enough to have the good ideas. We really need to be building the capacity, the engagement strategy, the press strategy to land this all well. And those are muscles that I think we need to set. The second thing that I think is critical as we're looking towards the future is figuring out how we pull folks back into the space, back into the field. Like I look across, one, Sasha, you already talked about the alumni network of OTI, which is incredible. I've been talking to folks over the past few days. There are people in federal government, state government, academia, industry. And I think we often think of the public interest community as a launch pad. And I'd also urge us to think of it as a landing pad as well, because I think that bringing talent back into the space is as important as cultivating it within the space, and both are tremendously important. And so as we look to 2026, 2028, and the converse is true too, how do we build capacity to fill these roles the next time around so that we are hyper strategic about where we want to see leadership in the federal government, in state governments, et cetera.
Wow. So I have one last question. I'm going to ask everybody to be super brief. But no, honestly, I wish we could be up here for another hour. It's been a ton of fun. And Sarah's point right now kind of leads me right there. So what kind of leadership does the field need? What kind of infrastructure, what kind of resources, what kind of institutions does our space need? And again, if we can be pithy. Kevin, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, more technologists.
Go down the line.
More technologists. It's as true today. Well, it's a little less true, but it's mostly as true today as it was 15 years ago, that we do not have enough technically literate people in Washington, D.C. to advocate on technology issues and to educate policymakers. They simply don't exist, in part because they're really expensive. And the work to build a layer of expertise like we have in the legal world to come and play in the policy world, for very little pay. We don't have that in the tech world. We still need to build it. We still need funders to help us build it.
Thank you. Lillian.
I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here and say, I think we need more funding and resources to do very geeky term, but postmortem on the last 15, 20 years of tech policy, because I do think we should question whether we've gotten it right or whether we were headed in the right direction, regardless of this administration. And I think for all of us that have been working in this space, right, even though there has been monumental progress, at the same time, we were still in a space in which you still have 5 companies dominating close to 50+% of the US economy. And all of those are technology companies that manage the way we access and distribute information. And so I think that there is a real moment here, an opportunity to actually invest in some reflection about whether we were headed in the right direction. Because if we get a moment in 2026 and 2028, and this is the most partisan I'll be, to kind of build back, quote unquote, and we build back in the same way that we were doing it, whether it's on, connectivity policy, AI policy, privacy policy, I'm not sure we're going to totally get it right. And I think that that's part of the investment that still needs to be made that I hope we can push ourselves on a little bit.
So I'm not going to be devil's advocate, but I will be yes and. I think we need reflection, but I think we also need to move quickly forward. I don't think that we have time to waste setting the priorities and the strategies for getting there. And I think we lack some capacity in the field to do that now. And so I would also argue for flexible surge capacity in the form of real dollars for organizations to to figure out what that strategy looks like in a hyper tactical way.
So I'll just say two things are true at the same time. One is, first of all, this field is better organized, better equipped, has smarter people, has an influx of young people doing this work that just honestly like brings me to tears every time I come to an event like this. And I'm so proud of what this field is building and what OTI has built. And at the same time, it is not enough, right? We are totally lacking in the capacity we need, the muscles we need. And it's not just about more technologists in Washington, which is true, but that we're losing our ability to do good governance of the tools that we're building. And I was thinking, like, if you'd gone back 15 years ago and said to all of us, like, in 2025, we won't have a national privacy law. Like, we still won't have a national privacy law, even though everybody thinks that we ought to have a national privacy law. Like, there are so many examples like that where we just haven't built the muscles that we need. And the changes are coming faster. So I think we really do need to build this capacity, and it's about attracting more people. Even though our field is doing so well, it's about attracting more people to this field and building more of the tools inside of government at all levels, and a more mature society that understands these issues too.
And Sasha, last word.
Last word. So
Briefly, if you could.
to understand what we need, you have to understand the curse of Cassandra, which, you guys familiar with the curse of Cassandra? Like, of course you are. You're all smart folks in the room. But for the people that are watching that aren't as smart as the people in the room, right? The curse of Cassandra is this notion of a seer who is cursed to see the future and never be believed. And technologists are the Cassandras. We see the future. It's obvious to us more often than not. And what we need is big, bold interventions. Things have metastasized and atrophied to the point that marginal fixes are no longer an option. And as such, when the technologists are saying, hey, we need to radically revamp and fix things and make it human-centric and make the interventions that are not just going to ruffle feathers, but cause perturbations throughout dominant economic structures. Yes, it's a political economic analysis born of understanding of technology that DC continues not to believe. And that lack of belief in what technologists are saying is what has led us inevitably to right here and now. And this will get worse if we continue to drive things through this curse of Cassandra mentality. Believe the technologists, they know what they're talking about.
And with that, we are going to Q&A. We'll only have a few minutes, but we're going to try to get as many questions in as we can. Sorry, I should say, people in the room, please wait to ask your question until you have a microphone in front of you, handed to you by one of our mic runners. And for the folks online, there's a Slido chat box to the right of the video. Any questions?
There's someone way in the back.
There's one back here.
Emily.
Thank you so much. A question that's been percolating in my mind quite a bit. How do we go about even getting to the point where we can envision a better tech future? What are the different ways in which we can do that? And this goes out to anyone who would like to answer that question.
Cassandra.
There's all of people envision a better future all the time, right? We literally had the CEO of Bluesky up here telling us, like, hey, there's a better way to do social media platforms. A lot of the times the answers are known. They're knowable. Like, the most patronization I usually get is when I'm telling people, hey, we should do this thing over here. And people are like, that's never going to happen, right? That's how Measurement Lab was built. We told the FCC, hey, you should do like crowdsourced data collection. They're like, it's impossible. And we're like, I don't think that word means what you think it means. And so we built the prototype for MLab to show the FCC how you could do crowdsourced data collection of broadband measurement data. And they're like, well, that's fine, but if you had data, then we'd use it, but you don't have any data. And so then we went back like a year and a half later with 50 terabytes of data. I'm like, oh, that's too much data. And I'm like, well, how did we just skip? How did we just skip from being impossible to being unusable and never stopped at a place where we would actually, and here we are like 15 years later, still struggling to get the FCC to just like use data from reality to drive their decision making. A lot of times getting to that future, like it's already here. We just refuse to acknowledge that these opportunities, technologies, interventions exist because they're not politically expedient.
And thank you. Can I just chime in and say, I've always viewed OTI as a very optimistic place. So we've gotten into a kind of dark place a little bit in this conversation, but I do think, and I understand it, but I think a hard place. But I think that I just kind of let's channel our inner optimism. And remember, there are a lot of things. I actually don't agree that our biggest victories have been undone. So much of what OTI has stood for has just become part of the fabric, right? That the internet's important. That wasn't obvious, 15 or 20 years ago. That it's worth investing in. That openness is a good idea, right? I mean, it's now ingrained in the new administration AI action plan, the idea of open source AI. There's a huge power in optimism and in good ideas, and I just think part of this is about channeling our inner optimism, reminding ourselves of that. I thought Kevin was going to come in and talk about his science fiction writers and optimistic futures. I think we just need to encourage ourselves to find those positive things and push for them. They are all around us.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hey, I'm Nat Purser from Public Knowledge. I kind of view people's continued use of Facebook as similar to people voting for Donald Trump, even though they hate him. Where, I have a lot of friends who are like, I use Facebook all the time, or Instagram, or some of the dominant platforms, but I don't want to migrate over to Bluesky. I recognize the value of openness, but I'm not migrating to a new platform. I'm not going to Mastodon. I like being where I'm at. So I guess my question is just like, what are we supposed to take away from that? The fact that people are very unhappy with their consumer experience on some of the platforms, but they're also not necessarily willing to leave and to try out new platforms that are encoded with different values. So how do we move from there, understanding that what we have is not perfect, but people have a remarkable unwillingness to try something different?
We do it better this time. To the extent that we did have a number of companies building a particular type of experience and infrastructure that benefited from data lock-in network effects. Let's not do that again. So yeah, maybe continuing Facebook users are a lost cause. I'm not sure what they're using it for anymore. My parents are using Facebook. Yes, I did used to work for Facebook, but that's not the point. But we are now building the next layer. We are now building the infrastructure for what is going to be the next internet. We are building all this AI stuff. That's going to be the main way we get our information and our entertainment. So let's not build that way this time. Let's worry less about rescuing the people who are trapped on vestigial things that are going to be less and less relevant over time, which I think Facebook is, Instagram less so, but more about looking to the future of how are we building the next thing so we don't have that problem again. Because yeah, it's a hard problem once you're locked in. I'm still on Facebook and I don't use it for anything, but it's there's going to be that one person who still messages you on Facebook and you don't want to miss that message. So let's trade away all our privacy for it.
But I also think we have to meet people where they are and meet the broader kind of public where they are. And I think as we build better, take them along with us. And I think that the nature of engagement and I think just a more community-centered experience, I think that's also part of what's needed in this next phase of building better. Which I don't actually think we've done a good job, right? the mastodons of the world. Like some of these things are really hard for the average person for whom Facebook feels great because guess what? It has communities. It's really easy. It's very local. Your buy nothing group. A lot of the work and research the New Public has done has shown that there's stickiness in all of that. And so there is a reason why people are staying on those platforms. It's also just much more integrated into our lives. So let's meet them where they're at and let's really take them along on a new journey to a different set of expectations about what the internet should be.
I'll just say very, very quickly, two-finger intervention, like that. One of the things that I think people in Washington constantly get wrong, but also people outside of Washington get wrong too, is that we accept technology as an inevitability, that this arc of technology, these tools, they've been developed and therefore we must accept them, and that is inevitably the path that we need to take. We have a lot more agency here as a society in choosing what we build and the rules around it. There's a lot of optimism out there about the good things that can come. We need to push towards that good vision and this is where OTI has helped and can help again in marrying technology and policy to think about that positive future that makes people's lives better.
And I think that is an excellent place to stop. Excuse me. Let's start all that again. I think that's an excellent place to end this conversation. I wish we could keep going. Thank you all so much for joining me here.
Thank you, Chaya.
Thanks, Chaya.
Thank you, Chaya.
And with that, I think I'm welcoming Lillian Corral back to the podium to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you again all for taking part in such a great conversation. As you all know, and as we've talked about today, OTI has been at the forefront of ensuring that technology serves democracy, advances equity, that makes sure the technology is accessible to all for the past 15 years. And as some of you know, my role at New America has been multifaceted. I've served both as vice president as well as of the Tech and Democracy programs, as well as the head of OTI. And so today we wanted to make a very special announcement, which is as we continue to strengthen our broader set of programs, we wanted to announce a natural evolution of it, which is one, introduce my colleague Prem Trivedi stepping into the position as director of OTI. So with that, I hope you just took notes and are ready to take on the next 15 years so you can beat the 11-year challenge. Prem, as many of you know, has really shaped OTI's policy voice in critical technology issues. He has a wealth of expertise on privacy policy and a strong commitment to our mission. He's been a great partner in crime over the last 2.5 years, I believe. So please join me in congratulating him, but also let's listen in on his next comments and vision for the future. Prem.
Thank you, Lillian, for that very gracious introduction. I'm grateful and excited to have the privilege of leading OTI in its next chapter. And I want to start by appreciating your leadership and stewardship of OTI over the last almost 3 years. So much credit to you, Lillian, on that. And then on a minor administrative note, if we can get the clicker back, it seems to have vanished. Thank you. Putting technology to work one click at a time. So most of the folks here in this room are familiar with OTI's values and our work over the last 15 years. And this previous panel provided a really excellent snapshot of the progression in vision, in priorities, and accomplishments, and gets us thinking about what to do next. So how is OTI going to meet this current moment? We'll do it with a combination of speaking out about the democratic stakes, of engaging on the ground with partners who are closest to people and lives being impacted for better or for worse, where technology policy intersects. But we're also going to do it by thinking ahead with clarity, creativity, and ambition. So this question of what's the future internet we want and how do we build it is largely what I want to chat with you about for the next few minutes. And so how we're going to do it, the short answer is up here. the pretty colors, informed by OTI's long-standing vision, right, to deliver equitable benefits of digital technologies and ensuring that they serve democracy, we put the human outcomes that we want to drive towards at the center, right? So you see here, inclusive, innovative, safe digital spaces. To my mind, and I think to the mind of most folks in this room, that's central to a vision for tech policy that furthers and doesn't erode democracy. How do we get there? With some of the supporting values and priorities and concepts that you see layered around it. And you'll hear these themes are going to sound familiar. You've been hearing about them all day, right? So there's, of course, openness at the left, central to OTI's mission, not least because it's in our name, and it's in our name because we believe in it. We have privacy and responsible data use at the top. We have a focus on internet architecture, and I'll say a little bit more about this as we get on later in the chat. And why it matters so much. And then at the base, maybe because it's fitting as a foundation for what OTI has done since its inception, we have connectivity and a commitment to continue closing the digital divide. So let me go into a little bit more detail in each of these things, but still sort of a flyover tour. So you've heard quite a lot about openness as a guiding principle today, and there are different aspects and manifestations of openness. So in brief, a few places and ways we can think about openness. We can think about it in data, in access to data, in the ability to port it. You can think about it at the protocol layer. You heard quite a bit about that in Jay's conversation with Anne-Marie earlier. The code and model layer, where openness in AI models is, in our view, central to having a transparent, accountable, and competitive AI space that doesn't, to Kevin's and others' points, sort of repeat the structural errors of the past. And we also think about it, openness in a governance and societal way as well, right? So openness furthers, even in rules and explanations about how things like AI models work, transparency, accountability, central to effective democratic governance. Privacy and responsible data use is another pillar of our work. We can protect data, and in doing so, protect privacy and people, while also thinking actively about the pro-social uses of data that we need to drive forward towards. And there's a lot of work we'll be doing in this space, but I want to highlight again for those of you who heard it or may not have heard it, we had an excellent talk earlier from OTI's own Sydney Silvestre about how we take valuation as a concept and the search for numbers and quantifying both data harms and data benefits and bring that to the privacy conversation in ways that augments privacy as a value in its eternal and uphill fight with values like innovation and security that often seem to hold sway. We also want to be thinking about safe and inclusive spaces online with an added touch and connection to empirical rigor. The empirical rigor from other fields is not always translating as well as it should into tech policy, which is why we end up sort of with reductive comments that we hear all the time. All social media is bad for all kids, right? That's not really a data-rich, context-informed way of thinking about the future that we want. It also leads us to think only in opposition and not in terms of what we want to build. To build, we're going to need data that's reliable. We're going to need data that's contextual. So we'll deepen our work, as OTI has often done and long done, as a bridge among research and policy communities and among diverse stakeholders. We also think here that technological innovation, surprise, it'd be bad if we thought otherwise, has promise. And we think about privacy-enhancing technologies, for example. Many of you are familiar with this. And we don't think about this in a blindly techno-optimistic way as a series of silver bullets that's going to solve our problems, but in a way that's grounded in realism, right? And pushes forward on critical things like needed resources to build the technology that we deserve and technology that serves all of us. And so that some of this work that you've seen so far and you'll see going forward builds on excellent work that we've done on age verification, on rights respecting digital identity, and on empirical analysis of youth well-being that gives us contextual context to build. You also see here connectivity, right? And to stay globally competitive as a nation, to equitably deliver the benefits of digital technologies to communities across the nation, we don't need yet another ambitious vision for connectivity. We need sustained commitment to an execution plan to realize it. So that's thorough continuity in execution that goes beyond election cycles. We heard a fair amount about how connectivity is truly a dinner table and a ballot box conversation. Then let's build that vision and execute it beyond election cycles. And so our focus here is on filling gaps in oversight and accountability. Think about what the role that states have to play now post the disappearance again of Title II as an accountability mechanism. We're also thinking about reorienting universal service to tackle well understood but still repeatedly unmet needs in affordability and in adoption. And then the last thing that I put here at the bottom, and I think you've heard echoes of this throughout the conversations today, internet architecture matters. It's often ignored. It's often obscure in the digital context, but it needs to inform nearly everything that we do. So I have a bit of a footnote slide, if such a thing exists, on why internet architecture matters. And I think this will inform a fair amount in explicit ways what OTI is thinking about going forward and how we integrate it with our other work. So as the built environment shapes us, so the built infrastructure of the internet shapes both our online and our offline experiences. And internet architecture encodes values. It influences the economics of the internet all the way up and down the stack, and it shapes our social experiences. So, surprise, surprise, controlling the infrastructure of the internet confers power. And we can see this particularly, this is a good time to draw lessons from around the world as we chart the course forward in the United States. Governments have been for quite a while shaping content via internet service providers, via DDoS providers, via web hosts. If we are looking, if we want to believe the technologists, as Sasha, I think, rightly called us to do, we should think about those threats potentially coming to the United States, and we ought to be ready for them. So opaque decisions take place, right, beneath the application and social layers of the internet. And if we want to shine transparency and accountability on the lights of the social and application layers of the internet, we better be ready to do that beneath those layers of the stack as well. So a little bit on how we want to move forward. And if we want to recapture the promise of the internet and the associated technologies built on top of it, including, of course, AI, we've got to make them serve us. We need to have a conception of technology and technology policy that is integrated tightly with society. And so we start with a values-driven approach that's rooted in human rights, in a public interest ethos that promotes fundamentally democratic values. And our, the 4 areas, the 5 areas that I talked about, we don't think of them and we can't think of them as discrete policy issues, verticals that are largely siloed from each other. They're interrelated. We need a holistic approach to tech policy that brings empirical research and insights from across these domains, brings them together. So you see here sort of what OTI has always done and will continue to do in this latest incarnation, interdisciplinary insights from law, policy, and technology, informing the way we convene across partners all across this room, civil society, academia, industry, and funders. We then want to validate those ideas that emerge in a really rigorous way, pressure test them, partner to pilot them if we can, and then emerge, we hope, with policy recommendations that are ethical, that are practical, and that are empirically grounded and rigorous. And I think our position within New America remains a tremendous advantage in this regard. Right? We are part of the technology and democracy grouping of programs. Democracy is very much at the core of OTI's soul. In recent years, under Lillian's leadership, we've also strengthened our collaborative ties across New America programs and are looking forward to doing much more of that. And I think this is the most important. It's not on the slide. You've heard some of this earlier today. By far the most important. None of the work that we have done thus far or that we plan to do is possible without each and every member of the OTI team, past and present. So when we celebrate OTI at 15 as a program at an institution, we're celebrating each one of those people. And I think a couple of folks mentioned earlier today, in the impact reports that you have, the last page lists each of those players who've been a part of OTI over the years and the ones who are here now as well. So let's just take a quick moment. Please join me in appreciating each and every one of folks who've worked at OTI. I'm conscious as I stand between you and happy hour now, which is not a comfortable place to be. I want to say one last thing before I introduce Paul. So we couldn't do this work we couldn't look forward without the leadership and the support of New America. And so I'm thrilled to introduce Paul Butler, New America's President and Chief Transformation Officer, who will offer some remarks to conclude this day. Thanks everyone for being here.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to scrap most of my comments that I had prepared to wrap up this day, mainly because that panel did it. And that guy, the new director of OTI, Prem Trivedi, also did it. I will tell one story, though, before we let you go. Anne-Marie may remember this. A few years ago, she and I were having a conversation with one of the most important partners that we've had at New America across all of New America for years. And we were talking about the technology and democracy programs, the vision for this cluster, and the work that we were doing and trying to do going forward. And we were just looking for input and guidance about where to take this next phase of work. And this partner that we were talking to said, the thing that I depend on New America to do is to tell me what most of us are not talking about right now, but that we should be talking about right now, and that we will all be talking about in the future. I do have to say that she talked about that guy, Michael Calabrese, as the OG, let's be honest, the OG of OTI. And the OG of New America. That's what she was talking about. I think that is the work, and as Prem said, that's the work that will continue. That is the work that we have always done here at New America, but that is the work that OTI has done. And you've heard today all of the panelists, contributors, partners in the space that we call home, doing the thing that we have known OTI to do, the thing that we know OTI will do. I do want to thank all of the former directors who were up here. Let's thank them again. It is truly an honor that you all would come back and spend this important occasion with us. And I would just want to thank you on behalf of me and Anne-Marie for coming and spending the time and actually investing the work that you've created a legacy here. You have to appreciate that. And congrats to Prem on inheriting that legacy and taking us forward, and for Lillian for leading us thus far. You all have earned this reception that is coming. Please carry the questions that you've heard and the topics that you've heard throughout the day and through the afternoon with you into the reception. It is right outside. Thanks everybody for joining us online, and we will see you hopefully many times over the next 15 years. Take care.